What's up, guys? It's Paragon here. I've been diving deep into the first season, the season of the Malignant and Diablo 4, and oh boy, do we have some sweet things to discuss. I've been on the grind, testing out latest gear, fine-tuning the gameplay, and I've managed to craft a killer build that hits like a freight train. Right out of the gate, this powerhouse build was laying waste to adversaries. At level 35, I was clearing the capstone dungeon, unlocking World Tier 3 with just a few choice aspects, and the hits keep coming. And after beefing up my gear a bit, I was able to lay the smackdown on the next capstone dungeon, launching myself straight into World Tier 4 at only level 55. And I did it with relatively no challenge. Here's what you need to know. This build delivers damage that's off the chart. Coupled with breakneck clear speed and top tier mobility, we're talking about a critical strike chance of about 65%, and that's without anywhere near close to optimal gear. This bad boy will get the job done, easily shepherding you from the early game stages straight into the end game's chaos. At the core of this build is the ability to deal colossal damage. We're leveraging the power of poison imbuement and a key passive skill that supercharges poison imbuement with an additional 75% more damage from critical strikes. Combine this with a few carefully selected aspects, and we're talking damage numbers that'll make your head spin. Imagine this: you face a nightmare dungeon boss, land 1 or 2 solid hits, then lean back and watch as the poison damage does the rest. It's a sight to behold. What's more, you retain the unparalleled mobility of the rogue class. Thanks to the seasonal hearts that you can score, you become a virtually indestructible force of nature. You can face tank most foes without breaking a sweat, save for some really hefty hits or those pesky poison mechanics, which, if I'm being completely honest, feel a tad bit overtuned for my taste. So let's talk a little bit about the passive tree gear choices and the stats that we want. All right, guys, so let's just talk a little bit about the core mechanics, the gear choices, the optimal build rotation of how to actually use the skills in an optimal manner, and then we'll talk about the passive tree choices. I have a build link in the description with a more optimized version. This is nowhere near min max. I've been in World Tier 4 for a while, but I've been running strongholds to level quickly, so I don't have very much gear. So I just started to actually acquire some gear, and as you can see, I still have some like sacred pieces, and I haven't even enchanted them yet because I just don't want to waste time messing with sacred pieces until I get into World Tier 4 and get some ancestral. So my gear is nowhere near optimized, and what you're seeing in the gameplay here of me decimating stuff is with really unoptimized gear. So that being said, I will cover what you should be looking for, how you can start to build early, and how you can transition into a powerhouse later on. But for now, let's just cover some of the key basic mechanics. And the first thing I want to talk about is the new aspects and the new hearts that they put into the season. So the first thing I want to discuss is this new aspect called imitated imbuement, and what it does is it gives your shadow clones the ability to mimic your imbuments applied to your skills. And when you cast an imbuement skill, it grants your active shadow clone 13% increased damage. So what happens is you want to pop your shadow clone, and then you pop your imbuement afterwards, which not only gives you a 13% multiplier on the damage that your shadow clone deals, it also allows your shadow clone to imbue its weapon with poison imbuement. And so what makes this so strong is that whenever we crit, we're going to be dealing 75% more damage thanks to one of the key passes that we're taking on the poison imbuement tree here called blended poison imbuement, where critical strikes with poison imbued skills deal 75% more poison damage. So this multiplier is calculated after all the other multipliers are kicked in, and then this increases that by 75%. So this is kind of in a damage bucket of its own and is calculated separately, which is extremely potent. This is why you see some of the really, really large poisons getting put up on enemies, especially when you have your shadow clone out. And one of those things that it really synergizes well with is one of the malignant hearts here. And one of the malignant hearts that we have here is it's a wrathful heart, and it says your attacks have a 5 to 15% chance to apply all imbuement effects at 76% of normal potency. Now this can roll from 70 to 80%, so I have a pretty decent roll, but I did roll a 6%, and it can get as high as 15%. But even at 6%, what makes this absolutely insane is all of your attacks, whether it's puncture, hidden blades, the hidden blades return into you and they spin around you, or your poison imbuments, this all has a chance to actually proc your imbuement effects. And when it procs, it applies shadow, it applies poison, and it applies your chill imbuement, right? So you have cold imbuement, poison imbuement, and shadow imbuement. And even though I don't have anything spec'd into them, it still applies them. But when it applies poison imbuement, it applies it at rank 9, because that's what I have on my poison imbuement. And it also applies it with this right here if it crits. So this actually goes off all the time. And what makes it really nice is when this goes off, it actually procs this consistently. And this is aspect of bursting venom. So this says lucky hit, critical strikes with poison imbued skills have a chance to generate a pool on the ground. And while standing in the pool, your poison imbuement skill has no cooldown and no charge limit. So what's nasty about this is on boss fights, you can literally just start attacking. It'll drop this pool on the ground because this procs, which a crit, it'll drop the pool on the ground, and then you'll have unlimited poison imbuements. And so you can summon your Shadow Clone and just spam your poison imbuement every 2 hits. So you'll basically pop your poison imbuement, do 2 twisting blades, and then redo poison imbuement, and it'll reapply it to your Shadow Clone, and you guys will be applying poison imbuement nonstop. And you can literally, within like 2 rotations of poison blades, put up like 8 stacks of poison on enemy. 8 stacks is 75% more multiplicative damage with the crits. So the damage is just amped up extremely fast because of this aspect. So I would say the key aspects that you need early, really, to just get this thing running, is you really want to try to get this one, which is Imitate Imbuement. This really helps for single target. This is the Ravenous aspect, and it allows me to have some extra energy regeneration, and this is not optimal, but I'm just running it until I get a better ring. This is aspect of the Expectant. It's for some extra damage multiplication. So this is one of the more key aspects that you want to try to get on one of your pieces of gear. I would say definitely put this on your amulet for the 50% increase in effectiveness. Your imbuement skills have between a 30 and 60% increased potency against vulnerable enemies. We're going to be putting vulnerable on enemies very easily because we're a rogue and we have a lot of ways to put vulnerable on enemies. So if you actually take a look at this, this can roll up to 60%, and it's a more multiplier. So what this does is whenever your imbuement skills go off, they're going to get applied at a 60% multiplied damage, which against vulnerable enemies, which is absolutely insane. Now remember, all this gets multiplied and then it gets increased by 75% more with our improved aspect of poison. So the only aspects you really have to have is you really need to have Imitated Imbuement. You really want to have Corruption if possible, and you really need Blade Dancer's aspect. This can be unlocked by doing Jalal's Vigil and Skosklin dungeon. It's quite easy to get early in the game. You just go to the dungeon, clear it, and you can apply this to a 2-handed weapon. And what this does is just makes your Twisted Blades orbit around you for a short time. On my boots, I'm running Critical Strikes grant movement speed because we're doing a lot of crits, so this gives us a lot of movement speed and a lot of movement speed quickly in between fights. It's great. I'm also running Disobedience just for some extra armor. On the gloves, I would say prioritize critical strike chance over anything else, even twisting blades. Now I have +2 twisting blades on this, which is nice, and it would be nice to eventually get +4 twisting blades, but prioritize critical strike chance because we really want to get those critical strike chance up as high as possible, because we're going to utilize critical strike in order to make sure that our imbued skills are being applied at 75% more potency, and also every time we critically strike, we have a chance to heal ourselves. So critical strikes not only is a defensive mechanic for us, it also does a ton of damage. So we want to make sure we prioritize critical strike chance on all of our gear that we're where we can get it. So I would say the most important things on gloves are critical strike chance, followed by plus to rank of twisting blades, and then attack speed, lucky hit chance. Any of those are fine to go ahead and grab on the gloves. Lucky hit is great because we have a lot of passives that utilize lucky hit, and one of our defensive mechanics that we use to heal ourselves is lucky hit. So you can never go wrong with having some lucky hit on your gear. Okay, for chest piece, I would say probably prioritize things like maximum life, increased armor, damage from close enemies, damage from enemies that are poisoned, damage from distant enemies. Anything that's defensive, because your chest and your legs are really where you want to get all your defensive stats. If you notice here, I got life, damage reduction while injured, which is still a good stat to have because you drop below 30% life and that kicks in. You can get that with your boots also. And if you notice, I have it on my boots. So whenever my life drops below 30%, I'm taking like an extra 55% reduced damage, which is just really insane. I would recommend for the chest piece for the aspect just to go ahead and grab Aspect of Might, because Aspect of Might gives you the ability to have 20% damage reduction, and this combos really well with this Brutal Heart. This is almost a must to have this Brutal Heart. This Brutal Heart does 10 to 20% of your incoming damage is suppressed. So this just makes it where if you get a 20% roll, which I have and I'm saving for a better amulet, a 20% roll will give you 20% of the damage that you take is just suppressed right off the bat. And so if you combine this with your chest piece aspect, which makes you take 20% less damage, you're talking about 40% reduced damage before anything else kicks in. It just suppresses 20% damage, and this is insane. Not only does this suppress the damage, but it also deals damage whenever you drop your trap. So when you drop the trap, it'll actually explode for quite a bit of damage. The damage, it's nothing great, but it's pretty decent, and it's just extra damage. But we're not worried about the damage. What we really want is the 20% reduced incoming damage, and it really makes our rogue feel tanky. So on this heart, you definitely want to try to get this one here because it applies the imbuement. And for the third heart, you can kind of put whatever you want. Right now, I just have this in here. Whenever I use my trap skill, it actually drops a decoy and it taunts. This just helps keep stuff off me for a few seconds. Whenever I'm drop a trap, it'll knock stuff down, and when it gets up, the enemies will sometimes attack the decoy instead of attacking me. It just helps with survivability a little bit, but there's a lot of choices here you can put in for this third one. Depending on the socket that you have also is going to determine what you're going to be able to put in, but you definitely want to make sure that you have at least one brutal. This can go into any socket because it's wrathful. You can only have one wrathful heart at a time active. So on helmet, I would say prioritize poison imbuement, cooldown reduction, and life. And then if you can get something like attack speed, like on this, it's actually great. So this would be a really good choice of helm. And I would say definitely go for the Mangler's aspect I have here. And the reason I'll explain in a minute why we're doing this, but this allows us to put daze up all the time. So whenever we deal direct damage to an enemy that's vulnerable, we're going to daze them. Because we put vulnerable up so much, whenever we're going to be damaging enemies so fast that we're going to constantly put daze on everything around us. And so let's go over the passive tree, and I'll kind of tell you how some of these stuff synergizes really well together. Okay, so for passive skills, we're going to start off and we're just going to grab puncture, enhanced puncture, and we're going to grab fundamental puncture. This allows us to put vulnerable up whenever we want to. And this is going to be great. Now, eventually you'll want to get the exploit glyph. We're going to grab 5 points into twisting blades, enhanced twisting blades, and advanced twisting blades just to reduce cooldown. Again, I really want to get the cooldown reduction as low as possible on all of our skills, because reducing the cooldown of our Shadow Clone is going to be key for dealing massive amounts of damage. So this is going to be optional for you guys, but I took dash over Shadow Step just because I wanted some mobility. And this allows me to basically dodge some attacks. So if I see something large coming out, I don't think I can get out of the way, I can kind of dash out of the way to avoid it. The only problem is this doesn't have unstoppable. So if you want to drop this for Shadow Step, that's perfectly fine, and this will give you an extra source of unstoppable with Shadow Clone. Now, sometimes I have to use Shadow Clone to get out of trouble because I get stunned, and you can get chain CC in this game, and it can be nasty, especially at higher Nightmare Dungeon levels. So if you want to swap this out with Shadow Step, feel free. I personally like dash for the mobility and for the ability to dodge stuff, but that's up to you. 3 points into Weapon Mastery is pretty essential for any rogue build. So we're taking 3 points into Concussive here because we want to get the 12% critical strike chance whenever we knock back or knock down an enemy. Now remember, we're running Mangler's aspect, so we're going to have like permanent daze up, and so we're taking 1 point into trick attacks because when you critically strike a dazed enemy, they're knocked down. So this is how we're going to generate a lot of knockdown. Now also our poison trap we're taking has knockdown, so we're taking poison trap here, and this will knock down enemies quite a bit, which will also proc concussive. So we don't have to just rely on poison trap cooldown. We'll constantly have this 12% increased critical strike chance, and critical strike is key for our build. So we're going to come down here and we're going to go ahead and grab poison trap, enhanced poison trap, and countering poison trap. And the only reason I'm taking countering poison trap over the extra damage is because I want to make sure that my poison imbuement is off cooldown as much as possible. We rely so much on poison that we really want to make sure that we have our poison imbuement up almost 100% of the time. And so having this up is really nice. So you can pop your poison imbuement, and then you can attack twice. When your poison is taken off the weapon, you go ahead and drop your trap. It has a 30% chance to reset your poison imbuement. Now, there's a good chance that your poison imbuement will get procced off the aspect that drops the pool on the ground where you can cast it for free. But if that doesn't proc, this is a fallback option, and this allows you to keep your poison imbuement going for longer. So it just feels good to always have your poison imbuement active. So that's why I take this. You can feel free to take subverting poison trap if you feel like you want to do a little more damage. I personally just wanted the utility of always having my poison imbuement active. And then we're taking 1 into exploit and 3 into malice because it just deals 9% more damage to vulnerable enemies. So coming down here, we're taking 3 points into precision imbuement, where our imbued skills gain 9% increased critical strike chance. Again, this is all about getting our crit chance for our poison imbuement as high as possible. This only applies to poison imbuement, and so some people don't like to take it, but this is something that we really need because we want to get these 75% more multipliers on our poison skill. So we're going to be taking 5 points into poison imbuement, enhanced poison imbuement, and blended poison imbuement. Blended, obviously, because this is what the whole build revolves around. Then I'm going to get as many ranks as we can from our helm, so I have +4 on my helm already, which is why I have 9 here. We're going to obviously take Deadly Venom at 3 stacks because this gives us 9% more poison damage. So if you're going to be doing a poison build, you're obviously taking this. And then I felt like taking 3 points in debilitating toxins was essential here because we're going to be dealing so much damage, poison damage to everything around us, that we're going to constantly be taking 15% less damage. So this, in combination with Siphoning Strikes, allows us to heal and gives us quite a bit of tankiness. So that will decrease damage. Our Brutal Heart decreases damage. So that, combined with the fact that we have Siphoning Strikes, we heal for quite a bit, and you'll end up being extremely tanky. This doesn't go off as often as it used to because they did nerf it. It was a 100% chance. Now it only goes off 75% of the time when lucky hit procs. But what you're going to find is that this goes off enough that you constantly are getting healed. And we're also taking Sturdy because we want to get this 12% damage reduction while close, which is just a really good source of damage reduction because we're almost always going to be up and close. So going down, and we're going to take Shadow Clone, the Prime Shadow Clone, and Supreme Shadow Clone, obviously because we're using it and it's one of our key sources of damage. We're going to go ahead and take Trap Mastery because when we pop our trap, it's going to give us 12% increased critical strike chance against vulnerable enemies. So again, when you daze an enemy or you knock them down, they're considered crowd controlled. And so this is going to be active all the time because we're going to be dazing everything around us. So with the exploit glyph, we'll constantly be putting vulnerable up around us, and this will keep this active all the time. Not to mention that when we'll have vulnerable up on any single target. So what makes this so good is that it gives us ability to generate an extra 12% crit chance with all of our skills, not just poison imbuement. So this is a really great skill. It's going to be active almost all. So coming on down here, we're going to take Adrenaline Rush, and then we're going to take 3 points into haste just for the movement speed. And it's nice to have this not only but for movement speed, but whenever we do drop below 50% maximum energy, we'll gain that boost to attack speed, which will allow us to do those punctures a little bit faster and really regenerate the amount of energy that we need to use our abilities. And we're going to be spamming that energy quite often, which is why I like to actually take Preparation, which will keep stuff coming off cooldown quickly. And then for our key passive here, we're taking Momentum. This is going to be up constantly because we're dazing enemies consistently and we'll be stunning them. This will be up 100% of the time when you're in combat. While at 3 stacks, you'll have 20% increased damage reduction. You'll have 30% increased energy regeneration and 15% increased movement speed. This really feels good, especially that energy regeneration and damage reduction. So that's pretty much the whole build, and that's how the build works. I have a build guide in the description with more detailed of what aspects you should have and what stats you should look for on each piece of gear. But if you guys have questions or comments, do leave them in the comment section below. If you have suggestions on what I could do better, definitely let me know. And again, for specializations, we're just taking Preparation. So every 100 energy you spend reduces your ultimate skills cooldown by 5 seconds. This is just great because we want to be able to use our ultimate as much as possible. And that's going to be one of our main ways to just absolutely melt everything on the screen, because when we pop this and we use Imitated Imbuement, it's going to double our poison imbuement. All right, folks, that brings us to the end of this deep dive into our passion-infused rogue build for the Diablo 4 Season of the Malignant. We've seen how this build absolutely decimates adversaries, swiftly clears dungeons, and how you can unlock world tiers faster than ever before. If this guide was helpful to you guys, be sure to smash that like button. It lets me know that you're enjoying this content. And if you've got any questions or have a favorite build of your own, drop a comment below. I'd love to hear what strategies you guys are rocking on the battlefield. New to the channel? Don't forget to hit the subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a video. We've got a ton of exciting Diablo 4 content in the pipeline, including more in-depth build guides, gameplay tips, and latest updates. So stay tuned and let's conquer the hordes of hell together. Until next time, this is Paragon signing off. Keep those critical hits coming, and may your loot drops be legendary.